Check, check, check. 1, 2, 3, 4. Check, check, check. Make sure I'll use this one. Yeah, we're good to go. Welcome to the UFC 235 Sherdog.com preview show. I am James Lynch. He is Ant Walker. We just wrapped up the weigh-ins here at T-Mobile Arena. Pretty eventful weigh-in. Nothing really stood out. We'll get into that in a second, but let's talk about the main event. Jon Jones defending his title against Anthony Lionheart Smith. A huge favorite, Jon Jones, as he usually is, but this is one of the most, I think from an odds perspective, most lopsided fights on paper. How do you see this fight between Anthony Smith and Jon Jones?
I mean, I think the odds makers have it right. Jon Jones, you're talking about one of the greatest fighters that's ever walked the face of the earth. Anthony Smith, for all of the credit we can give him for having this great redemption story of being a journeyman and suddenly finding new life in the UFC and finding himself main eventing in Las Vegas, in the fight capital of the world, that's a big deal. But at the end of the day, you're still fighting Jon Jones. His assessment that his jiu-jitsu is what's going to win the day against Jones, hey, anything can happen. But I don't think we've seen anything from Smith on the ground that gives any credit to that statement.
Yeah, and I will give the UFC credit. They have sold Anthony Smith very well this week in terms of his backstory and just getting fans to win him over. I think if you look at the last fight against Volkan Ozdemir, the fact that he was down a little bit in that one, came back, won the fight, I think that adds a little bit of intrigue to the matchup. But I'm with you. I think Jones pretty much takes care of business on Saturday night, but nonetheless a great title fight. Getting to the co-main event, Tyron Woodley defending his title against Kamaru Usman. Love the war paint on Kamaru Usman's face, in the weigh-ins. They've done a good job building up this fight. I think a lot of people disappointed. This wasn't Colby Covington fighting, but they've done a good job selling it. How do you see this fight playing out tomorrow night?
I mean, I'm really intrigued by this fight, not only because from a competitive standpoint, but how we went from really wanting Woodley to fight Covington, and that was the fight we wanted. When this was announced, everybody was confused, like, why? Why are we doing this? But when you saw them interact at the pre-fight presser a few weeks ago, it was just magic between the two. Like the jaw jacking back and forth, it looked like this is a fight that should happen. And now seeing them together during fight week and seeing how Kamaru Usman has just been so confident, his spirit's just so high. Tyron Woodley has been having the time of his life, it looks like, during this fight week. So to see this energy, like both guys are coming in so confident, both guys coming in with some serious athletic advantages over the rest of the division. I'm curious how it's going to play out. I'm leaning toward Tyron Woodley because I think the wrestling can negate each other, but Woodley is by far the better striker. At the very least, he hits much harder. I think Woodley might get this done. I'm looking at the 3rd or 4th round TKO. I think he lets Usman kind of wear himself out trying to get the takedown, and once he abandons that tactic, I think Woodley's going to go to town with the hands.
I agree. I think a late finish is probably likely. The thing to me that I look at in Kamaru Usman's fights is that he hasn't really had that type of performance that makes you think, okay, there's a bit of an X factor there. He uses his wrestling. We know he's a good wrestler, but you can't do that against Tyron Woodley. And I think it is a bit of a jump going from Damian Maia and Rafael dos Anjos to Tyron Woodley. I'm with you. I think Woodley's power is going to be the difference in this one, and he gets a late finish. Tyron Woodley's been in a good mood this week because of the fact he's got his good teammate and friend Ben Askren making his UFC debut. I wasn't sure if we'd ever see this day in the UFC where Ben Askren would join the Ultimate Fighting Championship, but here we are. He's done a great job selling this fight, and Robbie Lawler just as scary as ever. It's going to be a great fight. How do you look at this fight?
I'm loving this fight. The one thing I don't like is that this is the one guy that Ben Askren didn't call out. But from a style standpoint, this is probably the most intriguing matchup you can make outside of maybe Damian Maia. I really, really like this fight. And this whole time with Ben Askren here in Fight Week, this guy is a master self-promoter. He is incredible at what he does. For somebody who has a fight style that isn't exactly the most aesthetically pleasing to the casual fan, we know who he is. We want to see him fight. It's amazing what he's been able to do, and this fight week just makes me think, why didn't this happen sooner?
Yeah.
Why now at, I believe, what Askren's, 35 years old? Now at this age, now he's in the UFC. We've missed out on a couple good years of some really, really fun times with this guy, but I think when that fight starts, I'm leaning toward Askren. I think he gets it done. He's about as good of a one-shot kill artist as you can expect from a grappler. Once he gets a hold of you, he tends to get you on the ground, and once he gets you on the ground, you're probably not getting up. And I think Robbie Lawler, with the coming off of a really bad knee injury, he says he's healthy, maybe he is, but at 37 years old, those things don't make you any better. Yeah, Robbie Lawler has the power, but Ben Askren, man, I think he's spent this time away from the cage just being healthy, just enjoying life, just resting. while actually helping Tyron Woodley in his camp. So it's not like he's been out of martial arts. Robbie Lawler, on the other hand, has been reconstructing his body at 37 years old, man. I got to go with Askren by decision.
I do as well, and I'm glad you touched on that. I think the damage that Robbie Lawler's taken in his career will have an impact on this. Askren, you know, people talk about his boring style in some of the fights. He hasn't taken a lot of damage, and I think that's one thing that will pay dividends in this matchup. And dare I say, if Askren gets a win here, and if the numbers are any indication, just from what I'm seeing on the pre-fight coverage, this guy could be a good star for the UFC. He can self-promote. The fans seem to like him. The views are just, I mean, there's a big difference I'm seeing, at least with a lot of the pre-fight stuff, with the stuff that Ben Askren has done compared to some of the other fighters on this card. I think there is potential for him to really break out from this card and have a successful career. This card is loaded top to bottom. You know, we're not going to go through every fight, but one fight I did want to touch on: Jeremy Stephens, Zabit Magomedsharipov. They did get a little bit, you know, kind of feisty at the weigh-ins here. I think a lot of people are overlooking Jeremy Stephens in this fight. Going from Brandon Davis and Kyle Bochniak to Jeremy Stephens is a bit of a leap for Zabit, but they say he's the future champion. How do you see this fight going?
I'm going back and forth on this one so much. Looking past Jeremy Stephens is just not a wise decision. He's gotten so much better from a technique standpoint in the last several years. Looking at that Gilbert Melendez fight, I mean, that was a master work from Jeremy Stephens, man. The leg kicks, just adding that new wrinkle to his game. He's never been one that's been necessarily easy to take down. He hits like a truck. You can't count him out, but I want to lean toward Zabit simply because his dimensions. He's a really tall, long, rangy guy at featherweight, and typically, even though his technique is definitely on point, those guys have a little bit more leeway to get a little less technical, to kind of learn on the fly. I think, look at the main event. John Jones is the perfect example of that. A guy with such a long, rangy style. He learned on the fly. He wasn't the technician that he is today back then when he was defeating Brandon Vera and Vladimir Matyshenko and Shogun. He wasn't. But his athletic abilities, his body type was able to cover that gap a little bit. And I think Zabit could be that same sort of guy. So I want to lean toward him, but don't be mad at me if Jeremy Stephens one-shot KOs him. That is very well within the possibility, but gun to my head, Zabit.
People are going to get mad at me for saying this. I'm picking Jeremy Stephens. I think he pulls this one off. Like I mentioned, I think a huge jump in experience for Zabit. I know he's the future contender, but and I know he's got certainly a height and reach advantage in this one. But I think the type of stand-up that Stephens brings to the table, if he goes in there, he can knock you out. And let's not forget who he lost to in his last fight, Jose Aldo. Aldo just knocked out Moicano. I think Stephens is still at the top of the heap, and I think Zabit could be a future champion. I just think this is going to be too much of a test for him right now. But we'll see on Saturday. The odds certainly in Zabit's favor. The fight I did glance over quickly, but we will talk about it. Johnny Walker, Misha Cirkunov, great fight in the 205-pound division. Of course, this was supposed to be Ovince St. Preux taking on Misha Cirkunov. How do you see this fight playing out? The newcomer, you know, well, not newcomer, he's got a couple of fights in the UFC, Johnny Walker, but certainly on a roll against Misha Cirkunov, who's been sort of up and down in his career.
Man, this is probably the toughest one to call for me. We don't know what we're looking at with Johnny Walker yet. But we do know every time we've seen him, he's destroyed whoever's been put in front of him under very strange circumstances each time. I'm going to go with experience on this one. Misha Cirkunov is definitely at the upper echelon of light heavyweight. Maybe he survives that initial blitz and gets a submission once this fight gets to the ground. I'll go with Misha Cirkunov to pull this one off.
Good. We disagree again. I'm going Johnny Walker in this one. I think both guys, how they seem to win their fights is both guys come out guns a-blazing. I think Walker's going to be a little bit faster and takes care of business, although I will say Misha Cirkunov looks a lot more improved now since he's moved down to Vegas and training at Extreme Couture. I think that's been a huge feather in his cap, because I know when I used to live in Toronto, he used to basically train by himself at Extreme Couture there, and now he's getting really high-level training partners like Vinny Magalesh, like Rahani Marks, so that is going to pay off for him in this fight. Another matchup we got to talk about, you know, as we're wrapping this up, Mickey Gall, Diego Sanchez. I can't wait for this one. Sanchez with the experience, but certainly taking a lot of damage in his career against Mickey Gall, the youngster, the up-and-comer, 6 professional fights. How do you see this one going down?
I want to go with Mickey Gall simply because we've seen Diego Sanchez take so much damage, and he's been around for such a long time. And despite how confident he is, you know, spoke with him at Media Day. I know you did as well. I mean, reality is still there. Father Time is still a factor in this. The only thing that gives me pause is we were saying the same thing before he fought Craig White, and he utterly destroyed Craig White. Mickey Gall, I think Mickey Gall gets it done. I'm looking at second round TKO. I think that's going to do it.
And again, don't at me on this one. I'm picking Diego Sanchez. The experience and the fact that Sanchez never been submitted in his career. If you look at Mickey Gall's wins, all by submission. I think Diego's going to be able to keep this fight on the feet, and I think his experience and just his ferocious, sort of pace will be too much for Mickey Gall. Now, Gall could go out and knock him out. That's definitely a possibility, but I think Sanchez weathers the storm and surprises a lot of people and gets a decision win in this one, but we'll see what happens. Again, the odds a little bit crazy on this one. Sherdog.com, your home for all your coverage of UFC 235. Ant Walker's been killing it this week with the interviews. Adam Martin doing play-by-play on Saturday. Be sure to check out the site for that. And follow Ant on Twitter. You got to plug that handle, man.
Oh, yeah, Ant Walker MMA. That's also the Instagram. So a couple little things coming from Instagram. From the weigh-ins, you'll get to see Kamaru Usman's war paint.
There you go. And follow me on Twitter, at Lynch on Sports. Same thing on Instagram. Keep it very simple. Enjoy the fights, guys. It's going to be awesome. UFC 235 tomorrow night behind us at T-Mobile Arena.